Hey Pal, hey Mo, how's it going?
Hey, good.
I'm excited to have you guys here. Well, welcome back, Mo. And Pal, this is your first time on the show, right?
I am now I'm like, wait, I have recorded with you before
I
and it was
think
around the angles.
I could have
Yes. Oh
sworn,
my God.
yes.
Yes, you came on the show before. I always like forget because I'm like, I don't know why I thought I was like thinking in my head we did like a webinar or something like something else. But yeah, of course. Yeah, you, me, and Diana. And but yeah, it was just the three of us, right? And we
Yes.
talked about the angles, the first, seventh, fourth, and
10th,
10th
yep.
houses. Welcome back, both of you. Happy to have
Thanks.
you. So if folks don't know about you, I love for you guys to introduce yourselves, share your SMR, a little bit about your practice, all of that. Pal, do you want to start?
Yes. So I'm Pal on Twitter. I'm Pal Astrology. Also on Instagram, but I don't post as much astro content on there. And my Sun Moon Rising is Leo, Taurus, Taurus. And as for my astrology practice, I've been doing natal astrology, solar return charts, and then starting to dabble in electional and horary. However, I've had my readings closed for it was a good chunk of 2021 and indefinitely for 2022. I'm in an 11th house perfection year right now. And in true post 10th house fashion, I guess, really just trying to figure out what the next steps are for me. I've been thinking a lot, for example, about like how to teach and mentor new astrology students, as well as just continuing to learn and grow my own astrology knowledge. So that's me in a
Awesome.
nutshell.
Cool. I love to hear that. Yeah. And I feel like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense that your books are closed right now and that you're like, what's next at this turning point? Especially because all that Taurus, or you're about to be in Eclipse City.
Oh no, it's starting already. So
It's
I've
already
been
here. Yeah.
yeah.
I hear that. Well, welcome back. Yeah, I just realized all three of us are like the Taurus Scorpio axis. I have the Scorpio stellium. You have a Taurus stellium, or not stellium, just like concentration, we'll say, right? You have the Leo stellium. And Mo, do you have a bunch of planets in Taurus, or just you have Sun and Mercury? No, Mercury's in
Um,
Gemini, of
I
course.
have Sun K2, and then as for fixed signs, I have Mars and Leo and Pluto in
Oh,
Scorpio. That's it.
oh, so wait, this is your nodal reversal.
Reversal, yep.
Oh my gosh. Wow. What a year this is going to be for you. Well, yeah. Why don't you introduce yourself? SMR, all the things.
Okay, well, I'm Mo. I love talking about my chart. Taurus, Sagittarius, and Pisces rising. Let's see, my practice. It's very Hellenistic, medieval. I am learning Vedic. However, I will not be reading charts from that lens. But it has enriched the way I think about like the planets and houses and stuff. So it's great. Um, I also do solar returns. I'm probably gonna stick to predictive for people, but also mundane. I'm dabbling into mundane a little bit. So like there's that. Um, I also do tarot as well, which will be relevant for this episode. So yeah. My books are
Awesome.
open. I've literally only been open since like end of December. Like,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. I'm sure you think they'll still be open when this comes out in early April?
Um, will they be open? I would say they will probably be open until mid-April. Like, I don't know when in April
Okay.
you're releasing this. So,
7th, hopefully, probably.
I mean, but I could also extend it. I know for sure in May I'm closing up. So,
Okay. Okay. Fair, fair.
yeah.
When our chart ruler enters back into a dark house. That's how I'm looking at it, at least. I'm like
And
getting it all in before then.
I switch perfection years and I start out that year with my Time Lord retrograde. So,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Mo and I have the pretty much the exact same ascendant degree. So yeah, we get right now it's we're recording this early February and Jupiter is crossing, just sitting in our ascendant degree right now. It feels really nice. I don't know. Does it feel
Sounds
nice for
nice.
you? It's nice for me. It's nice for me.
Good.
For me, it's like purely like the best parts of it are just purely mindset. Like that's it. It's just like I just have faith things are going to work out. Like nothing's actually going super well right now, but it's just, you know, I'm well fed. I'm like able to smile about shit. It's kind of like that. So, but hopefully Jupiter does come through once it is officially in my first house, once it crosses that threshold tomorrow. But anyway, you two have a podcast together. So you've both been on my show before. But yeah, you two have a show together. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Where do we start? Like, I feel like we were just like, we should do a podcast.
I, for one, I think was very excited to do a podcast with Mo in particular, because we both have that Leo Mars. And so I just had a feeling that what I didn't want was this to be just like another project that just like ends up falling through. And even though I have a lot of fixed stuff, like I have Jupiter in Aries, so I have a propensity for just starting things and then just like dropping it. And so, but we came up, you know, the name Fixed Astrology Podcast is just obvious. Like both of us have very, very strong fixed placements in our chart. And we, in terms of topics, like we sat and we brainstormed for a while, but really wanted to start with a series on the Decans. And so we just wrapped it up. And so getting your message and asking, like where you were asking us to come on your podcast, it was just very, very timely because we had just wrapped up the Decan series.
Oh my God. Yeah. I didn't realize that it lined up that way.
No, it was like some weird synchronicity type stuff, because I swear to God, literally that the week before you hit us up, like, you know, we just finished the Cap Decans and like releasing it. And like, we're just like, you know, we want to like finish the Decans off in like a nicer way. Cause like we focused on, you know, describing the archetypes and stuff and not really so much like how you would use it in practice. And so it was funny that like you literally hit us up like at the perfect time. It's great.
I love that. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Because I remember when you guys started the podcast and you started the series on the Decans, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is good. I love a series, you know. So anyone listening, as you're listening to this and as you're being amazed by everything you're learning, be sure to check out the Fixed Astrology podcast, because that's when you can really dive into the individual decans. You guys do an episode on each decan, right?
No, so we actually went sign by sign. And
okay, that's what it was, sign by sign.
Yeah,
in each sign. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it was. So yeah, you can, if you're interested in the decans of Taurus or the decans of Libra, what have you, there's an episode for that, which is really exciting. But before we get into it, I don't know why I'm like so like we have to talk about how we know each other before we talk about anything else. For some reason, I'm really strict about that. So yeah, I know you both from Twitter, right? I think that's how we first connected. Is that how you guys connected?
Yeah, it was also Twitter.
And we haven't met in person yet, right?
No, not yet, but soon, I'm excited to soon.
Yeah, because I'm actually, you're moving in March, right?
Yeah, I'll be moving to New York City in March.
Pau's in Hawaii, and that's a big reason why we haven't met in person. You know, why you probably haven't met a lot of astros in person, because you haven't been on the mainland, and so you're moving very soon.
And hoping to check out some in-person astrology conferences at some point.
Amazing. Well, I'm coming at the end of April, and I'm trying to have some sort of gathering if it's safe by then. So I'm definitely going to see you then, shortly after this episode releases. And Mo, you guys are like, You're not on the continent, and you're in a different country.
Yeah. So for me, I'm like, Norwalk might not be happening, but like if you find me at Isar for reasons that I will not announce yet, do not be surprised if I'm at Isar. That's all I'm
Okay.
gonna say.
Okay.
I'll be there. I'll be there. I'd love to see you. But regardless, we've shared, internet space for like a lot over the past couple of years, and it's been great. So, fixed the light. What am I trying to say? Fixed kids unite. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Fixies belong together. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
They do.
Yeah. Yes. My goofy ass. Okay. So anyway, yeah, let's get into it. You two have a podcast together. You met on Twitter when Astro Twitter was still magical. was still a nice place to be. No, I'm joking. I don't know what it's like right now. So I can't talk. But and you guys decided to make this podcast together. And yeah, I'm curious why the Decans, like what. Well, first of all, before we even say that, I guess we should kind of define the Decans, right? I guess we should kind of say what that is. So just top level, the Decans are maybe I should let you guys do it. I'll just say like the very
doesn't matter, go for it.
Okay, I'll say like the very like dictionary simplified definitions, which is they are 36 well, it's the division of the zodiac wheel into 36 parts. And so any wheel, any circle is 360 degrees. And therefore we have 360 degrees, like notches or whatever in that wheel. And then we tend to divide it by 12 when we're looking at the 12 signs of the zodiac. Decans divides each of those signs into 3 equal parts with 10 degrees each. And so we get this wheel that is, it's almost like zooming in on the zodiac into just more, I don't even know how you would put it, like more smaller segments, basically. And Decans are basically, we have planets that rule each of these Decans. And there's 2 different systems actually of rulership which I'm sure you guys can speak to. And essentially they're part of the essential dignity system or schema. They're considered a type of dignity that a planet can hold, which is if it's in its own decan. And we're going to talk about what type of dignity that is compared to other types of dignity like domicile or even triplicity. And yeah, I'm sure you guys will speak on the history of it a little bit better than I can, but yeah, does anyone want to take it from there and talk about where we get this system from?
Let Pao take the wheel.
Well, as Kirah had said, there are 2 different orders of rulership. There actually are 3, and I'll touch on that third one a little bit. It's a little strange, but the 2 main ones that most people who study traditional astrology know are the Ptolemaic order, which if you use astro.com as your free software, which many people use, it's referred to as the Chaldean Decans on there. And then the second one is the triplicity order, which is also, it has a different name on astro.com. It's traditional Decans on astro.com. And so here's the difference between the 2. The Ptolemaic order, aka the Chaldean Decans, starts with Mars in the first decan of Aries. So it's Mars who rules that first decan of Aries. And then from there, the planets go in order of, at the time, what was perceived as the slowest to the fastest planet. So it's the planetary speed. The triplicity order of the Decans, aka the traditional Decans, they're ruled by that sign's triplicity lords. So the first decan of the sign is always going to be the same as the domicile lord. So for example, the first decan of Cancer is ruled by the moon. So this third, and then just real quick on that, there is overlap in the system. So there are some decans that are ruled by the same planet, no matter which system you use. I especially love to pay extra attention to those decans. Yeah, because like, for example, like a double Mars ruled decan is just going to be very, very, very Martian. As for this third decan that I referred to earlier, there is a third order called the Manilius decans, and it is on astro.com as well. So Manilius was an astrologer who assigned the decans to signs, not planets. So it's sign rulership. There's other instances of Manilius, like avoiding the using signs as rulership instead of planets. And this is something like I haven't fully researched. Like I don't know why he did it this way or what the reasoning was behind it, but it kind of does track with him.
Okay, cool. I didn't know about that one. I'm just going to share my screen again of a Decan's wheel that I made for my course, for some of my classes. This is the Chaldean order Decan wheel. And this is, we're using Cancer rising for the Thema Mundi. But yeah, this is an explanation or a visual. If you're watching on YouTube or you're watching, the visual of this, you can see we have the 12 signs, and then each of those signs divided up into 3 different parts. And as you say, we start with Aries, right? The first decan of Aries. Is that where you start? Is that where it starts? I guess it is.
Yeah,
right?
it is where it starts. Yeah.
Okay. And then we go from there. And yeah, it goes in Chaldean order, starting with Mars, then the sun. In Chaldean order, you might recall me mentioning the order of the spheres or the order of the cosmos in earlier episodes this season, and the sign episodes. And that order that we spoke of, starting with Saturn as the outermost planet and going in, we're using, the speed and distance from Earth. It's a geocentric model. And coming in from there, Saturn to Jupiter to Mars. When we get around the entire wheel, we end up at Mars twice. So Mars, there's a double Mars between Pisces and Aries, which I think is kind of interesting if you think about that transition. Just like when planets move through those 20 degrees, But anyway, so the Decans we get this system from the Egyptians, right?
So I was gonna chime in about that because it's really interesting. So, basically you can think about Western astrology as, merging the 12, sign or 12 constellation system from the was it the Babylonians, and this 36 Decan system from the Egyptians. Because what the Egyptians would do is they would track, I guess, the rising and setting of these different okay, so I have to back up a little bit. So back in the day, the Decans actually used to be associated with fixed stars, right? So each of these divisions had an important star which was associated with a deity that you could propitiate, petition for whatever you needed to do, or say you were sick, or say there was some particular thing you were trying to accomplish. You would look at, I guess, the heliacal rising and setting of certain stars associated with those decans to achieve some of those things, right? And so now the decans are not associated necessarily with those stars per se, but I think it's interesting that in some later traditions, you could pick whether you would use decans or if you would use something like lunar mansions, because the idea is supposed to be similar. However, I don't think that the Egyptians were coming at it from the perspective of the moon. At the end of the day, it was about, diurnal rotation, which is, the motion of the sun. So it's similar but different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So there were these like star clusters that the Egyptians were mapping. I don't know if it was simultaneously, but we're talking like pretty long stretches of time. So around the same time as like the Babylonians were mapping the constellations, the signs. And when the Greeks, right, the Greeks came and took over that land, that traditions began to merge in ancient Greece. Then traditions began to merge, and we started to put them together. So yeah, this is a framework, I guess you could say, that comes from ancient Egypt, and throughout time. I wonder, I guess like when did we start getting the associations with tarot to the Decans? Does anyone know?
So I think that came later because a lot of the associations that we get come from the Golden Dawn tradition. So that probably had to be like what, 19th century, I suppose. I would
Okay.
imagine. I mean, perhaps there could be something older that I'm not privy to, but a lot of those attributions come from like that era.
Gotcha. Um, yeah. Does anyone want to speak more on that? Like the associations between the Decans and the the major arcana?
Yeah, so I can go into just like how it works exactly, and then Mo, you can chime in. But look, as you had said, the 12 signs are divided into 3 decans, meaning there's 36 decans total. And then there are also 36 tarot cards when you take out the major arcana, the court cards, and then the aces. And so these 36 cards are then divided into 4 suits that correspond with the 4 elements that you see in astrology. So wands are fire, pentacles or coins are earth, cups is water, and then swords is air. And then so within each suit, the cards, those cards that are left over, the 36 cards, are numbered between 2 and 10. So how are these 36 tarot cards then assigned to the 36 decans? As I already mentioned, they're divided into suits that correspond with the elements. So cups correspond with the water signs, Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces, and for example. And now for each of the numbers 2 through 10, they correspond with a modality. So the 2s, 3s, and 4s are the cardinal signs. So for example, Cancer is a cardinal sign, and the 3 decans of Cancer then are associated with the 2, 3, and 4 of cups. 5, 6, and 7s are the fixed signs, and then 8s, 9s, and 10s are the mutable signs. And then furthermore, each planet has a major arcana card that's associated with it, like Jupiter with the Wheel of Fortune. And then each sign has a major arcana card associated with it. So like Cancer and the Chariot. And there's even some practitioners, and I don't know if this is more modern or if this does come from the Golden Dawn or other traditions, but I've also heard of practitioners who even associate the court cards with certain signs, like the knights are mutable signs. They're associated with their respective elements. Me and Mo referred a lot in our own podcast to T. Susan Chang's book, 36 Secrets. It's an excellent source on the tarot and the decans that looks at both the major and minor arcana that are associated with each decan. So, I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah. And then I guess like what we tried to do was, like extending on T. Susan's like great work. Everyone needs to own that book. I will not stop till everyone owns that book.
I know, I'm like tempted to go grab it from my shelf and
go order it. You need to give her all
it's
your
so
coins.
good.
It's great.
Yeah.
Like but no, what like Pao and I tried to do was to extend on her work and combine that with some of what we were inspired by attending, Austin's post Norwag workshop.
I was there. Yeah.
Oh my God. Like ever since I listened to that, obsessed.
It's so good.
Like,
it's so good.
Oh my God. And so
yeah, everyone should check that out. Austin Kopic did a whole post-conference workshop at Norwalk 2020, which was virtual, about the 36 decans. And we haven't mentioned Austin yet, but he's sort of like I don't know, the prince of the Decans, maybe you could say. like
Yes.
he wrote the book. He wrote the book 36
36
Faces.
faces.
I was lucky enough to get one of the first editions, and I also have it signed by him. I got it signed at NORAC 2019. He
Oh
was
my
very
God.
drunk. It was like 3
Can we
a.m.
like can we, speaking of 36 faces, like I'm waiting for him to drop the second edition. And
It's
it's like,
coming.
what kind of Jupiter magic do we need to do to make it
They're
happen?
doing all the magic, I'm sure. I mean, I think, yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's coming this year, though. I think that I would imagine that he wants to get it out while Jupiter's in Pisces, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's his ninth house.
I'm
Published a
hoping.
new book. I'm sure that's gonna happen. But I think it'll happen soon. But yeah, Austin Coppock, 36 Faces. He wrote the book. It's coming back. It's, new editions coming out soon, hopefully soon to when this drops. And hopefully going to have him on the show this season too. We'll see. We've talked about it. And yeah, I was actually going to share my screen and show you guys my birth chart in tarot cards. So if you're
Oh my
watching,
God.
I posted this on Instagram. You can find it on Instagram from October 2020. But yeah, I actually laid out, I was with another podcast guest, Chris Chow, who I'm recording with soon. And yeah, he came over and visited, and we did this. So we actually were listening to some of Austin's Astro Tarot class that I took, like nerding out hardcore. And just like, we should look at this. And Chris and I have similar charts. He was born a couple of days after me. He's a Virgo rising, I'm a Pisces rising. So we were just like, basically have all the same placements almost. And so yeah, this is really fun looking at it this way. And I would definitely recommend folks do this. So basically, you take out all the major arcana. This was just planets and signs that I did. So this doesn't have the decans, but just kind of piggybacking off of what you were talking about earlier around the associations. Pisces rising, the moon sign associated with Pisces. I basically did all of the houses. You lay out all of the houses, and then the planets that are in those houses. And it tells a cool story. It's a really cool way of looking at the chart. So I would recommend, and then you could go even further with the decans as well.
Yeah, which is great. And so like I feel like by delving into the decans, like going in through the astrological lens, even just understanding the archetypes of signs and planets, um, and applying that to the tarot cards, it actually unlocked a new way of seeing tarot. So like a couple, let me like throw out my two favorite examples. People go, why is temperance associated with Sagittarius? Or, why is the chariot associated with Cancer? And it's like, people just see, like, for the chariot, for example, they just see a guy on, like, in a chariot, like with these two like very intimidating looking like lion type things, right? Or sphinxes. And they're just like, how could that ever be associated with Cancer? I'm like, well, Cancer is like represented by an animal with a hard shell and it has claws, right? And on top of that, like the chariot is all about not exerting so much control. Like the control comes through adapting. And what is Cancer but like adapting to new environments so that it can create a familiar, situation. For Temperance and Sagittarius, it's like if you think about like the correspondence between that card and the Thoth deck, which is wonderful by the way, that card is actually called art. And what I think of is alchemy and like putting unique things together to come up with something that's inspiring. And it's like, how is that different from, Sagittarius, like gathering what's around and like putting it together in some like unique combination, like, usually to tell a fun story, right? I mean,
I
these are,
was I was
yeah.
I was taught that temperance by my teacher Lindsay Mack.
Mhm.
she kind of described it as like when you're able to come to the realization that you need help from spirit. And it's like it's like you're doing all this work, but you need some help from spirit too. It's like that combination of like your effort plus like the relinquishing of like, you know, of control basically. That type of alchemy too, which also feels really Sagittarian as well, like and Jupiterian and that. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's another reason I also love those associations, because it makes you think about the archetypes in a different way.
For sure. Like, and so, I mean, I hope we were able to do this, but I feel like, you know, the marriage of like the actual, you know, tarot symbolism itself, but also, you know, the thousands of years of, you know, what different people were saying about the Decans, like just kind of makes you think about tarot, but also astrology in a different way. And I don't know about you, Pao, but like whenever I was sitting there with Austin, like, and going through his like seminar about it, like just thinking about, wow, like I would argue that out of all the essential dignities, Decan or face or whatever you want to call it, is there's a lot that's like more symbolic. Like it's not like, oh, this works good or bad. It's like it's more like descriptive. That's how I felt anyway.
On that, like one of my takeaways from Austin's workshop on the Decans, when trying to think about like trying to compare how the Decans are with the other five or the other four essential dignities, I remember the way he had described it is that a planet in its own Decan is like a secret superpower, because when you look at the other dignities, a lot of those planets have those dignities, in like kind of like it's not really through your own merit. It's not like it's, you know, by title or, you know, or inheritance. Like for example, when a planet's like a domicile lord, right? It's like we're really thinking like it's a king who rules his kingdom, and how do kings become kings? It's like an inherited title. And so whereas he said with Decans, right, like we have to really note that look like Decans is the weakest. It's considered the weakest of the five essential dignities. Austin, I remember he worded it as like it's like the Decan, like a Decan ruler is like being a panhandler, but at the same time it's like, okay, but this panhandler also just like whatever money he collects, or, you know, his survival through the world is still like through 100% like his own merit and his own effort. So that was just kind of like another takeaway. Like, yes, I do think the Decans can be a lot more symbolic and descriptive, but I think they can also just speak more to, I guess, what our own, like, how do I say this? Yeah, just like our own efforts and like our own merits too, and like what our planets, like what those are, the planets in our natal charts do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And I feel like, yeah, I remember the way I remember him putting it that kind of clicked for me is, it's sort of like being in a video game. And when you like reach a certain level, AKA certain part of the zodiac, you get like, you know, like a new, power is unlocked basically. Or something like that. Like you get this sort of special power when a planet is in its own decan, that it's like, yeah, it's something different. It's not like different from that planet, but you get like this very, very particular expression of that planet. Yeah. Decan
Do you
rulership
have
is
any?
interesting. I don't have
Do you
any.
have any
That's why
planets?
I think it's
Oh.
hard for me to like conceptualize. I don't have any planets that have dignity by Decan rulership. How about you guys?
Mars.
Yeah,
Mars.
we both have that Leo Mars, but it's tricky because it's that for me, and my Leo Mars is also in its own bound, so it's bound.
wow.
And yeah.
Mine too.
Oh wow. Okay. Interesting. I wonder if I would look in the other system, I might have one, but I don't even remember ever seeing one there. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting, I mean, maybe we should talk a little bit about how they're used, because like you said, we can use them as like a part of essential dignity, and it's the lessest of all the dignities. I usually don't say like, or primary and lesser. I usually say primary and secondary, but it is pretty much like, it's definitely not like having a planet in domicile or exaltation or even triplicity. It's a different type of like, benefit you get. That's kind of low key. It kind of feels a little stealthy, honestly.
Yeah, like I kind of want to like build on top of that like imagery of the Decans describing like a skill, and I think this would be louder like for certain planets like Venus, for example, who has, I think all of her Decans are in signs where she is debilitated. If we go by
Mhm.
the Chaldean system anyway.
Mhm.
Um, but one way you can think about like a planet that has a decan and a sign that would be considered like an enemy sign, or like a sign that would be like where it's very, very peregrine, as in like there's no triplicity whatsoever, right? Is that, you're in enemy territory and you have a skill that can help you survive. So it's like, maybe I'm, descended from, prisoners of like war or something, but the only way to like make it in a country that doesn't respect me is to sell this craft, or like do this performance, or like serve this very particular function. And so I
Hmm.
see a lot of it like that.
Yeah, I'm just going to show another visual here. Because Venus does have decans and all of the signs that it finds stability in. Virgo, the sign of its fall, um, Aries, the sign of its detriment, and Scorpio, the sign of its detriment. And other signs too, where it otherwise would be peregrine, like Aquarius, not Sag, where else? Aquarius, Cancer, it's not peregrine, but yeah, so that's a really great point. Does Mars have that in any? I think Mars has that in Cancer, right? Oh no, it doesn't. Is it just
Well,
Venus
if
that
you
has that?
oh wait, Mars has, I think it's just Venus, and I would say Venus, Mercury, and I want to say Jupiter, because Jupiter has that
Jupiter.
Decan in Capricorn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's got one in Gemini as well.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that is a really cool way of, and I tend to pull on that with Venus, especially in Virgo, because Venus also rules nice chunk of term, a nice chunk of
Mhm.
bounds in Virgo too.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's a great point. And then you have Mars, the first couple of degrees of Scorpio being like the most intense Mars in the entire zodiac.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So like you said, like we were saying, we can use this as a way of assessing essential dignity in a planet. But what are other ways you use the decans for?
I want to add too that on top of looking at which decan your planets fall in, it's also really worth looking at where your angles, which decan your angles fall in, as well as the lots. Like another takeaway from Austin's workshop was him saying that the decan that your lot of spirit falls in describes the core meaning of your life. And like, for example, like my lot of spirit is in that third decan of Capricorn, which Austin calls the throne, and is represented by the Four of Pentacles in
So
tarot.
you.
And it's very 100% me. It's I am a leader, but it's almost always going to be like very, very behind the scenes. Like I'm very much like the kind of person who really just like wants to be like organized and like train, our spokespeople and stuff. Like I'm actually really, really rarely on camera for someone who's a communications director.
Fourth house Leo
And
stellium.
yeah, it is. I know it's so fourth house Leo, but and it's in my ninth house. So I think even just going back to what I was saying earlier in this episode, just my thinking about like I'm a really, really good teacher and a mentor. And it is, I think, kind of just the next step in this period of life for me.
You know what? Like, I think also about that last decan of Capricorn is like, who gets to decide how we use and distribute resources. And I think a lot about, you and challenging labor structure. Like,
Well, can we just say what it's ruled by the sun in the Chaldean system, right?
Mercury and
So
the triplicity system.
okay, cool. Yeah. So that's where we get what was it? Something about the throne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Throne imagery.
Yeah. And we didn't really say that, but like that's another big thing about the decans that is very different from all the other types of essential dignity is that there tends to be imagery associated with it, whether we're talking about the tarot card. But yeah, throughout time, right? There's been these kind of like images or I don't know. Yeah, that's the only word I can think of. Images or symbols or whatever associated with each of the decans. And that was a big part of Austin's book, his first edition. And that's a big part of the second edition. I think that's actually what has kept it up for so long is like they're, been working through the creating the illustrations. Yeah. But yeah, so like you were saying, sorry, about the third decan of Capricorn, where your part of spirit is, I definitely feel that about mine too. I mean, once I learned about the second decan of Libra, which is where my Venus is, and my part of spirit is, they're at the very edges. I have Venus at 10 Libra and part of spirit at 19. And yeah, I mean, it's just like, damn. I mean, I renamed the second decan of Libra the bondage decan.
Yeah.
It's the bondage decan. As soon as like Austin started to describe that in the workshop, and I was like, oh, okay, so bondage, like BDSM, is ruled by Saturn. And
Saturn.
Yeah, it's very peak Saturn. This is where Saturn exalts. And the reason I call it the bondage decan is because it's about making these like commitments, these like bonds really. And these commitments that have to do with like trust. And it's almost like a commitment like that, like marriage, you could say. I think the imagery that he uses in the book is like wedding rings or something that are like interlocked or whatever. But yeah, which brings up so much like devil card imagery, like Capricorn imagery too, just like being chained or locked to something. But yeah, the trust that's required for that, but also like the equalizing aspect of a commitment like that. How commitments can, yeah, kind of put you on equal footing in a lot of ways. And that shit, like just thinking about that, like makes me feel like excited.
I want to ask how you feel about like that narrative playing out with like both the lot of spirit and its ruler being in like your 8th house.
The 8th house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it definitely feels 8th housey to me. Like it feels like talking about that is exciting, but at the same time, there's almost like a doomed feeling to it as well, which to me, the 8th house has a doomed feeling to it, like just in and of itself, like where it is in the sky is when the sun is setting basically. But it's just sort of, it's the idle place. It's when it's like hanging out in that weird space in the sky. So it's like, you can see what's coming. You can see the ground and you're just like, in that part of, and that you're kind of waiting for death to come. It's the gate of Hades. I also have the asteroid Lucifer exactly conjunct my Venus.
I love that.
And I have a Lucifer Venus. It's super morning star Venus. So yeah, I have I've been like, I think over the past year coming into a new relationship with my 8th house that's still sort of like, blossoming. And next year I'll be in an 8th house year, so I'll have a lot more to say about it, I'm sure. But yeah, there's something about, I think even like the commitment, like, yeah, the commitment piece feeling like both something that is like the security. It's almost like being like, let's go to hell together. Like that type of vibe. It's like, I don't know. That's kind of what comes to me.
You guys have all the fun, like a lot of spirit things. I just have
You think that's
let's
fun?
see. Yeah. I mean, I have mine in like what mine's in the sweet spot of Virgo. Like, yeah, it's in the sweet spot of Virgo.
What does that mean?
Um, it's got like big artisan energy, right? Like, like, oh, let's like put all this effort into like looking good, being good, great. But it's just like, that's playing out in my house of like relationships and contracts
Mm,
and things like that. And something that I've thought about is
you're
because
talking
my
about the
Chiron,
second
yeah,
the second
my
decan.
Chiron's actually in that Decan as well. And there are lots of themes about like, how much am I willing to commit with other people versus like, needing to be alone. Because I also think of the imagery of the Nine of Pentacles, which has, a very luxurious woman who is on her own. And so, I've been unpacking that imagery. But yeah, like it's
Yeah.
interesting stuff. I think it's also showing up in my desire to like cultivate like an artistic practice. And I feel like I'm trying to partner with people who can help me do that. That's something that I've
Mm.
tapped into a lot more, I feel.
I love that. My chart ruler
Yeah.
is there. I have my chart ruler in the sweet spot because it's in Venus's terms too.
Love that. That is awesome.
Um, and yeah, I like the Nine of Pentacles imagery that's associated with this decan is so loud to me.
Mhm.
And I think of Nine of Pentacles, I think of I always come back to what Austin said in that workshop around that bird. I forget what type of bird it is, but in the traditional wider rider weight, there's, like you said, a woman in a garden alone, but she's like holding this little bird. And it's this bird that like is basically able to just like kill pests, and it just like comes around it, like, you let it loose. I think it's kind of like, I don't know the word.
Like
Like
quality control.
it's quality control, but I think the bird itself like just like goes ham or something. Like it's like wearing like a helmet or something to keep it from like
Yeah.
seeing. Because it's like one of those things, like once it goes, like doesn't, it's like hard to like get it to stop,
Yeah.
maybe. I don't know. I might be, whatever. But yeah, it's basically quality control, like you said. And there's very Virgoan quality to that in and of itself of like, okay, harvest is almost ready, like there's abundance all around us. Let's like picking out, the bad eggs, basically, weeding the garden and getting out the pests so that we can celebrate this feast. Um, yeah, I love that. How about, are there any other points that kind of stand out for you guys? I mean, how about, I know the ascendant, the decan of the ascendant degree is a big one too, right? And that can kind of speak
Midheaven.
to,
The midheaven as
yeah.
well.
Do you want to kind of speak to what those might signify, like what to kind of look for in those?
At least for your midheaven, I would say like certain elements of like, okay, so I'm team, whole sign slash equal houses perspective on the midheaven because usually it's floating around. And so someone on the astrology podcast said this, and it stuck with me ever since. Like, because she was like a equal house person. I can't remember her name right now, but I think they were on the episode about like aspect patterns, I believe. I can't remember her name.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking
She
about all
was
the aspect
great
patterns.
though.
Yeah, it was great. But anyway, so when you have equal or whole sign houses, the midheaven is not always in the same place as the 10th house. And so what she was explaining is that when you have the floating MCIC axis, that becomes your personal experience of, what your life purpose is versus, what you feel like your private life slash, your origins are. Whereas like the 10th whole sign or equal sign house and fourth house become like the observable experience of, your public life versus, like your home life, right?
Mm.
And so you know, when you have the degree of your midheaven in a particular, I would say this about the terms as well, like pay attention to what planet is ruling, but like for the decans, because there's more of like an obvious like imagery or narrative. Like I think the themes or archetypes associated with the decan that your midheaven is in often relates to the career that you're in, or the way you approach your like career, or like if you're not like a career person, like how you feel about your life purpose or what you feel your life purpose should be.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's already pinging some stuff. Do we have you have your midheaven in the second degree, or sorry, second decan of Sag?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I do.
same. Um, yeah. And then how about the ascendant? Do you guys have anything to share? I mean, we have the same ascendant degree too, Mo.
No, about the ascendant, I find that like, I mean, what I remember I had that whole like thread on appearance like ages ago, but like I don't think you can look at decans alone for appearance and stuff. I would say like certain elements of like the way you move through life are captured by the decan your ascendant is in. So like Kirah, I don't know if you feel this way about our ascendant, but you know, a lot of the imagery of wandering and like needing to abandon things in search of like treasure, I feel like that's my whole life. Wishing I
Mhm.
was somewhere else, being somewhere else, going somewhere else. Like literally, I'm always in
Very
transit.
much. I mean, you are a third house person, but I do feel like that for sure. Especially, I mean, I feel like even lately, I think with like my 12th house Saturn return, but just, and we're talking about the first decan of Pisces, which is ruled by Saturn. What is, does Austin call it the labyrinth?
Yes.
Okay, so
Elaborate.
yeah, the imagery you can think of like a labyrinth, and wandering is something that I am starting to prioritize more and more in my life, like in my everyday life. And I think it's something that we that a lot of modern day people, or people in you know, especially Western societies, and just especially, yeah, I'll just say that, especially in Western societies, but I'm speaking obviously on the US, what I know most. We don't get that, we don't have the privilege of being able to wander on a regular basis. I think that it's to our detriment. You know, I think that like just human beings as creatures, we're meant to be walking around and wandering and exploring, and just having, just wandering is about just like walking around, or moving around with no agenda, no place to go. Um, and it's so freeing and so important for me, I think. And that's also just, I think, yeah, it's kind of a way I move through life too. Like I definitely am very purposeful and driven, and have like certain directions, but at the same time, I'm like, it's kind of like the kind of the big picture of it is very like, well, just see what happens. It's just
Yeah.
like going with the flow. Like we're just, you know, it does feel kind of labyrinthy, life in and of itself. Um,
I
yeah.
think the one last thing I would want to add on how the decans can help us really understand these different angles in our chart is, like, you know, you were showing us that Instagram post where you had laid out your natal chart and the cards associated with it. Like I think it could really deepen like your astrology and your tarot practice to even do that with just the angles in your chart. You know, something for one, it'll help you understand how oppositions work, because every single one of us has an opposition in our chart, even if it is just the ascendant, descendant, the MC, and the IC. And then two, like, yeah, I mean, just to kind of really sit there and just see, like, okay, like you've, like in my case, like my ascendant is in that second decan of Taurus, which means my descendant is in the second decan of Scorpio. Like even just seeing those two cards, the Six of Pentacles versus the Six of Cups side by side together, helps me understand like who I am versus, you know, what my relationships are like. Or if you do the same thing with the midheaven and then the IC, it's like my public life versus my private life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to also piggyback off of that. I mean, if you're a quadrant cusp person, have a field day doing all of your like axes, because I think it will be really enlightening 100%. And if you
Yeah.
do equal signs, I would recommend doing all the houses equal house, whatever. Equal house. If you do equal house, like I would recommend looking at all the cards that are square, like, that share modality, because you'll start to see like the archetypal journey. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I feel is very underrated.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something about just pairing the imagery with the knowledge that you already have that unlocks so much. It's a really beautiful practice to pair the tarot with the astrology in that way. Um, yeah, and I feel like I remember reading that the ancients did kind of look at your rising decan in regards to your health and like vitality and matters of the body as well, and probably like the maybe the condition of the ruler of that decan or something, but especially term too, that all matters, bound in term. Maybe we should do an episode on that too. I want to. But yeah, so yeah, we kind of talked about the dignity and how the correspondences work. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit. I mean, we gave some good examples. I would kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the decans of Aries, just because we're in Aries season when this releases, and might be nice to kind of just zero in on that one. So I'm going to pull that up again. But yeah, I mean, we start with Aries when it comes to the Decan system with Mars ruling the first 10 degrees. And we should kind of specify, if folks are out there with like, what if I'm at 10 degrees, like my Venus is at 10 degrees of Libra, and it's in the second decan. So the first decan of any sign is going to start at 0 degrees of that sign. And the first decan ends at 9 degrees, 59 minutes of that sign. Mm-hmm. Once we get into the 10th degree, that starts the second decan. And then again, that goes until the 19 degrees, 59 minutes. And then the 20th degree starts the last 10 degrees, the last decan of that sign. So if you have any planets between 0 degrees and 9 degrees, 59 minutes of Aries, that's the Mars ruled decan of Aries. Does anyone want to talk a little bit about that decan?
Like, I love how you pointed out earlier, Kirah, that like if you think about actually I think I need to make sure that I'm correct. If I remember correctly, in both the triplicity system and this Chaldean Ptolemaic system, the last decan of Pisces and the first decan of Aries are double Mars decans. So
yeah, that's so true.
Mars.
Yeah.
I think Mars is the only, at least in the Chaldean system, is the only planet that gets, 6 decans instead of 5, like everything else. Mm. And you can just see this, like, if we want to go with the Aries as the first sign, Pisces is the last sign, you could see it as like the starting and ending, like you start giving shape to something by forging it in fire, right? But you can also melt down something that is no longer useful by forging it in fire. I say this because Mars is associated with forgery. So,
and also violent childbirth.
And so
it's like birth being, it's not always violent and messy and painful, but tends to be. But yeah, birth being this sort of like violent and intense entry into the world, which is very much this, Martian experience, and then also death being a potentially Martian experience too, and re-entering, the underworld. Basically, I think of like the sixth house as Mars's realm, and it's like once you get past that descendant, you're in the sixth house, and it's back to the underworld.
Exactly. This is a very like initiatory decan. It's like you could think of it in terms of like clearing space so that you can like, start civilization almost, if we want to go there. Like that's the imagery I see a lot, because usually like if you look at, the ways that this Decan is described, it's usually a person like who's very fierce, has an axe, and is like ready to swing it like indiscriminately. So yeah,
Yeah, I think Austin calls this Decan the axe, right?
literally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then
Yeah.
the two of wands is associated with this Decan, which is funny because when you look at the traditional Rider Waite imagery, it's not violent at all. But it does depict someone who, I looks like a Western explorer is holding a globe in his hand, and that in itself, it allusions to imperialism and conquest, very, very violent.
Wow, that's such a good point. Yeah, that's an incredible point. There's also just the imagery of the two wands and kind of symbolizing a door opening or like a portal to step through. And yeah, again, that sort of entry, I just, penetration, it just feels so Martian, like cutting,
Yes.
cutting through something to clear the way. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, that's the first second of Aries, very Martian. And so like what would you say, like how would people kind of apply this to their charts if they have a planet or a point here?
So I would say that like the planet would express itself in those narratives. So like for example, I've had a lot of clients in that like, the very first like generation of proper like Sagittarius Plutos who all have like like their Saturn in this decan, and usually it's them like bucking some kind of trend when it comes to like whatever Saturn is ruling in their chart. So like Saturn is already having a hard time in Aries because it's the sign where it's fallen. You're kind of shirking limits, expectations, norms, things like that, usually breaking away from some, restrictions imposed by other people to pursue like a set of rules, principles, and what have you that are new and fresh for you to commit to, right? If it's Mercury, you probably, I don't know, like want to write things that are like kind of avant-garde and out there, or like maybe you have a very aggressive way of speaking so that you can like sort of cut through the BS. It's things like that. Like so just kind of like try to imagine how like a planet would behave using some of those archetypes.
I love that.
Yeah.
One of my good friends is a triple Pisces, like Sun, Moon, Rising, but she has Mercury in early in early Aries, and like she can talk especially when she like gets really excited about something, like she'll just trip over her words. Like it's that she cannot speak fast enough for how how fast her Mercury wants to express itself. And then she can say some zingers, she can cut you with her words if she wants. Yeah, what were you gonna say, Pal?
Yeah, I wanted to just quickly throw out. I had the notes from our podcast episode for the Aries Decans. So in terms of just some very quick celebrity examples,
Oh, nice.
the quarterback Russell Wilson has Mars in this Decan ruling his 10th house, and so I mean
Wow.
clearly he's like a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Yeah,
So very
and quarterbacks are the
literal.
ones that are like cutting through shit, right?
Exactly. And in terms of like a non-Mars planet, so Fergie has Sun and Jupiter, the singer, not Princess Fergie, but our Duchess Fergie, but she has Sun and Jupiter in the 10th house here. And just to think that, she got big with the Black Eyed Peas, but then immediately like forged this solo career that she's mostly like known for now.
That's such a good point.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think Diana Ross is another good example of people with planets here in this first decan of Aries, and her she became famous because of a group, but she had a bigger and better solo career, like pretty much. Yeah.
Damn. Now this makes me want to look at like all the charts of people who split away from split away from groups. I
You
mean, I don't think fiance has anything in early Aries, but
should.
maybe something else in a Mars second.
He does not. No.
How about Decan number 2 of Aries, ruled by the sun?
So I like thinking about like the progression of the decans of Aries as like the starting of civilization, right? Or like starting a new colony somewhere, as Pao like so eloquently mentioned about like the first decan. So if you think about like the Three of Wands, even like there's this guy who's got all these wands and he's like waiting for somebody to come back, right? And he's like he's got all this like land and like vast expanse in front of him. So now it's just like you're basically like, if you think of the sun as like a monarch or like a ruler or like the leader, it's like, okay, you're the example, you're standing out. And what's even better is that the sun's exaltation degree falls within this decan. It's like you're going out and being seen. And like if you think about the sun and like its gravitational pull, you're also attracting people to want to come around you, right? And so it's like how to lead and put yourself out there so that you can like step into this vacuum and like fill it with things that are reflective of you and like I guess what you're trying to project. That's how I see this particular decan.
As someone with their moon there, I feel like that hits for sure. Especially in like a nice second house way for me, because I feel like just having a second house luminary feels very like, I always say luminaries in dark houses, shine light where it tends to be dark. And I like to talk about money. Especially like within our field, right? Within like this profession. And I'm all about making astrologers more money, and helping us be more prosperous and all the ways we can. And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel like we don't get a lot of people. I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or anything, but just to kind of speak on like, a luminary and a luminary's decan in the second house. Like that's something I definitely want to keep doing and do more of, is like shedding light on just how we handle money in this industry. Cause like, just one of the conferences, I'm not going to name names, but like is looking for volunteers to work at the conference, and not just volunteers, but they have to pay like a deposit basically in order to do this, and they only get a portion of it back. And it's like, we can't keep doing it this way. You know what I mean? Like we can't keep asking people to work for no pay for like very minimal personal benefit, especially during a pandemic. But
Absolutely not.
I will not get off. Oh yeah, let's not do the exalted sun thing and take up all the space on this. My bestie has their son there in the second too. And yeah, I mean, I think they're in this process of like kind of realizing what that means for them. And a big part of it is like being seen for like who they are. And, whatever, I don't know. They've just been in this very much like this process of becoming, and it's been really cool to see. And yeah, I always think about their exalted sun in the sun's decan as like they're kind of becoming more and more comfortable around like being seen for just who they are. I think eventually like we'll kind of step into some bigger leadership positions, as they kind of become more and more. I hope if you're listening to this, Teds, I love you. But yeah, so yeah, do you have any other like cool examples for second decan or second decan people?
I do. So just to rattle them off real quick, Hugh Hefner has his sun in this decan.
Oh, wow.
I laughed when I heard Mo talking about like, you know, gathering people around you. I mean, he literally had a Playboy bunny mansion. But Linda Goodman also has her sun here, and it's in the first house. And I just really love this for her because, you know, she's known for her Wonder Woman days, but she's still big on Twitter, and she's been popping up on my feed a lot like recently and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Wonder Woman has an Aries sun in the sun's decan. Wow. Amazing. And that's so like, I don't know, Wonder Woman is such like an Aries type figure too, just like the leader archetype, especially. Yeah.
Isn't she the daughter of Aries in the not the mythology, I guess the DC?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right? I'm trying to remember.
Sounds right to me.
It sounds right to me. I'm not the one. By the way, everyone, we're recording this like during a Mercury station. So I think, I don't know, we're doing our best to remember stuff, but
we tried.
And then, let's talk about Decan 3 of Aries ruled by Venus. So this is one of those places we were talking about earlier where despite being in detriment and otherwise having no other dignity, no triplicity here, I don't think there's term rulership here, but maybe there is. But regardless, not in this part. Okay. So but we have this kind of secret weapon decan rulership of Venus ruling the third decan of Aries. So anyone have anything to say about this decan?
I love this decan because like it's also a decan that Jupiter co-rules, so both benefics do really well here. You know, I like this decan because it's one of the decans that Austin also says has big propagandist energy. And you know, as someone with an Aries Venus in this decan, absolutely, I totally see it. Like, there's something about being able to, I guess, rally people, not necessarily in the way that Leo 3 would be able to, but like, you know, being able to forge like really intense relationships with people like that are like inspiring. And so like I feel like that's been showing up for me lately in terms of like my client work, you know, being able to like coach people through things that are going on. I've also seen a lot of people who have the moon here who kind of have like life coach motivational type energy or something like that. I think Anderson Cooper has his moon in this decan of Aries, and you know it rules his 10th house. And so like I think of like his style of like interviewing and talking to people, because it's like you're touching people emotionally and making them feel like really intense emotions, which might be used to mobilize people around, you know, causes that are important.
I have Jupiter in this decan, so it's the other planet in the triplicity order that rules this decan, and also the propaganda descriptions definitely resonate with me. Like my job is I'm literally a communications director. Like I have to constantly come up with propaganda. It's my job. So I find it really, really fitting. Austin has also described this decan as being like, I remember he used the words weaponized charm. And I know the celebrity example he had given was Marilyn Monroe has Venus in this decan.
Wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. Weaponized charm is really good. And I also love like, the propagandist, because it's like this Aries, like, you know, you could say Martian, sort of archetype of like, how could you say, like forcefully doing things, you know, like being really direct and forceful. You might say aggressive or even just direct, but then like making it cute with the Venus and Jupiter, you know, making it like with Jupiter especially like really inspirational, and attaching meaning to it and purpose to it, I think. Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Weaponized Weaponized beauty. I love that. Wow. Okay, cool. Um, yeah, do you guys want to talk about any of the decans of Taurus since you have planets there?
Um, I'll let Pao lead off on the Decans of Taurus.
Oh boy. Yeah, let's start with Taurus one. This one is I believe Mercury and Venus ruled.
Yep.
Is that correct? Yeah. And so Austin calls this the plow. So, you know, when we in the Aries decans, we had all this kind of like militarized conquest imagery. In the Taurus decans, and you know, in some of the other Earth decans as well, you see a lot of agricultural references. And so you'll see that in Taurus, you know, it's Earth sign, blah, blah, blah. My moon is in this decan, and so is the moon's exaltation degree is also in this decan. And T. Susan Chan calls this like the Lord of Worry, I believe. Yeah. And or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's not the Lord of Worry. But if you look at the Five of Pentacles, right, you see these two people who clearly have had a rough go at life, who are outside of a church in what looks like cold or dreary weather. And this really begins the Taurus story of you know, of scarcity, like having resources and then things going wrong again. And how do you constantly just kind of prepare? How do you deal with these cycles of scarcity and abundance, which just come up in everyone's lives like time and time again? This is the worry part, the scarcity part of this story. Having the moon here it's funny because I do have this exalted moon, but I definitely could feel like there's just I feel this constant pull to constantly be planning and worrying, even when things are really, really okay and like abundant. So,
yeah.
I wanted to make a comment because I just thought of this now. Like I just thought of, you know, like the Hierophant, like being Taurus's card and being like the spiritual gatekeeper in a sense that like, you know, this is the person who teaches you how to like do like daily devotionals to like live out important principles, right? And like I think of the fact that like the Taurus decans, if we go from the tarot point of view, starts out with, you know, two people struggling outside of the church, right? And then I think of the fact that we end with Taurus 3, which Austin calls the prayer beads, and like that's just so loud to me. Like, you know, it's like, okay, either like we got ourselves in a pickle or this is like worst case scenario. Like I think there's like this hesitation towards, you know, like do we turn to, I guess, certain elements of tradition or like, you know, certain structures where people can help us like sustain ourselves, or do we just like kind of stubbornly go it alone? I could definitely see it with people like especially who have placements in that first decan.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of break into like the Taurus, this place where Venus and the moon, you know, find comfort and rejoice in some way, but then it's like you kind of forget about the like what happens when we go without without like the abundance and that the Venus and moon provide. Yeah. How about Taurus too?
this one is Moon and Mercury ruled, I believe. And Austin calls this one seed and soil. So again, we're continuing this. So he called the previous decan the plow. This one's now seed and soil. And when you look at the Six of Pentacles, you can see why, because now you have completely different imagery of clearly a well-to-do man now giving alms to, or, you know, donations to poor individuals. And you can tell in the Rider-Waite imagery that they're the same individuals that we saw outside of the church in the first card in the Five of Pentacles, because you can see the patches and the clothes of the figure who's like closest to you in the card. And I again, this is Moon and Mercury ruled. I feel like in some ways this Decan out of the three is just so fixed, because I think it just kind of really speaks to, you see the scales in that imagery, and it just reminds me, again, like success comes from consistently balanced action over time. It's consistency. And so here you had in this, the previous Decan was the plow, and it's like, okay, that's like that hard, like rough, like just grueling action. And then now you're at seed and soil. It's like, okay, this is like the planting and like the reaping stage.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. This is why I love talking about the Decans and talking about the tarot imagery, because you really do you can get so deep with the archetypes of each of the signs.
I feel like it really deepened the Taurus archetype for me, especially because I remember being like first learning astrology and reading this kind of the stereotypes of Taurus and struggling with it a lot, because for me it personally just didn't resonate. And I feel like this really adds some complexity to the stereotypical, like, oh, Tauruses are materialistic and that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
I love how for this Decan Austin brought up like work-life balance, but also just like the it's almost like thinking about like the laws of physics in a way, because it's like, for every action there's like an equal but opposite reaction and things like that, right? And so I think about like the balance between, like who's getting rewarded for like the work that they put in, or who didn't, right? And I think of the fact that we have people like Karl Marx, who is a solar eclipse in this Decan of Taurus, whose whole legacy was, coming up with this framework for understanding how capitalism, basically strips people of their agency and labor, and distorts that balance between like the compensation that people are due for the labor that they actually put in to a process. So
do you know what degree that's at by chance, his eclipse?
Hold on,
I'm curious because I just started obsessing over I saw this like meme that was like on September 25th, 1926, Henry Ford announced, like, created the first 5-day 40-hour work week. Everyone boo Henry Ford or whatever.
Okay,
and then so I was like, I gotta look at that. And then that chart is wild. And it's getting pinged a lot this year. So I'm curious.
So his eclipse, oh wow, it's like a North Node eclipse. His moon is at 11 degrees Taurus. His sun is at 13 degrees Taurus.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's getting pinged for sure. We have an eclipse in Taurus in a couple weeks after this episode releases on April 30th.
Degrees, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we get another one around 11 or around 12, I think, right? Or maybe
I think it's like
October. Or no, September, November.
Yeah. November.
Yeah, that's wild. Okay, because this chart for the 40-hour work week is like fixed T-square madness. It's like Moon, Mars in Taurus. Mars is at like 18 Taurus. Okay. I think maybe 18, I think 19, maybe between 17 and 19. Okay. And then Saturn's at 22 Scorpio. And Jupiter is at like 17 Aquarius. Neptune in Leo and late Leo. So this summer we get that Mars, Uranus, Rahu conjunction, and at 18 degrees of Taurus, which is like right on that chart's Taurus. Wow. And it's also Saturn's going to be in an exact square to that chart Saturn, like it's transiting that Jupiter. It's just lots happening to that chart of the 40-hour work week. And it just makes me think of just the ongoing, labor movement that's happening right now, and the Uranus Saturn squares. And yeah, we'll see. That's just interesting. I didn't realize that I never looked at Marx's chart, but I didn't realize that there was,
he's also an Aquarius rising.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. With Saturn in Pisces. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, my dad has he was born during the Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Taurus,
Wow.
at 11 Taurus, and Uranus is there right now, and he just finally retired at 81. Uranus returned basically. But yeah, Uranus came to his Jupiter Saturn in Taurus, and he's no longer a working man, which is amazing because he's been, he was born 1940. He's been working since he was a kid.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, thinking about that, well, what made me think of that was when you were talking about, long work, consistent work over time pays off. And like, that's why my dad took so long to retire. He's been working literally in a laborers union for like the past
Wow.
40, 50 years. Yeah, I think it's been over 50 years because I think he started in the 60s or something like that. But he wanted to wait until the cars were paid off, the house was paid off, like our student loan debt was, like, he worked until he paid off everything that he wanted to pay off. And yeah, he finally retired. And that just feels so second decan of Taurus to me, the way you were describing it. Yeah. Let's talk about the third while we're here.
Oh, the third decan of Taurus. Oh my God. So
Ooh, this one's double Saturn.
yeah, I have my son here. So yeah, the prayer beads. So like I love how Austin refers to this as like the insurance policy decan. It's like, okay, I know the depiction of the Seven of Pentacles is like, somebody who's like working hard at like crops, like trying to make them grow, and like maybe they're not growing enough. So like I always interpret this one of two ways. It's like, either something beyond your control happened and like you have to negotiate with the fates, like to make it work out better next time, or like I always see it as like, you're overwatering your garden. You're being over prepared. And like in doing so, you're killing your garden. So I find that, people with planets here tend to like embody those themes. And I find that, Tauruses who were born during this part of the season are like not necessarily like the squishy or flowery Taurus just because it's a double Saturn decan.
Yeah. Our algal Tauruses.
Yeah. Yeah, I rarely draw this card, but when I do, like it has stood out to me because one time I drew this card on a day where I learned the hard way, like why I should not schedule a COVID vaccine right before I have to lead like a really important meeting. I did not feel good during that meeting, and lesson learned. And then the second time, like more recently, I drew it. It was right before, it was like a couple of months before I knew I was going to leave my last job. And when I drew it, I suddenly just kind of had this inspiration to just list out every worst case scenario that could happen on my like last day of work. Like, my medical insurance lapsing or, finding out that, I only have like 6 weeks or, like 4 weeks worth of vacation I'm going to get cashed out for, and not this like 6 or 8 weeks that I thought. And like, as I wrote things out, there were actually some things like I really realized like, oh, I could, if I get ahead of this now, it's going to be okay. And it did end up being okay.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
I feel like for my sun placement, because it rules my 6th house, and it's in the 3rd, like some of it is like literally describing my life as a scientist. Like you do experiments and all they do is like not fucking work. And yeah, that's literally like my day-to-day experience. You do this and it's like, why the hell did this not work? And it's just like constantly having to like contingency plan to figure out like how to make something work or troubleshoot something. I think also like how do I put this, like there's elements of it that has to do with like, for the fact that my work has to do with like, studying the causes of disease and how to like cure or prevent disease. Like literally that's like a lot of my working life thus far has revolved around that. So like it's quite literal.
Yeah. Wow.
I have a really good example. That's a good segue from that. I shared this on our podcast too, but Charles Pfizer, the founder of Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, has his Saturn here.
Wow.
And obviously we know Pfizer now because, they're one of the major producers of the COVID vaccine. But, when he was alive, so it's in his first house too. I mean, this is a really fucking loud Saturn in Taurus in the third decan. But he started working out or started doing anti-parasitic medications, which is how the company had started. And him and his cousin who had founded this company were known to be just obsessed with making quality products and medicines. The slogan that Pfizer had come out with, I don't know if it's still their slogan, but at the time when he was alive, when they founded the company, is Pfizer quality.
Wow. Pfizer quality. That is so double Saturn.
I need to see the synastry between me and that chart. Working at Pfizer.
That's amazing. Wow. Well, yeah, thank you guys so much for going through those. I think that's just nice. That's nice to kind of keep in mind as we, move through Aries season and into Taurus, and as planets move through these signs. And it's also just, I think, really helpful to kind of have that framework of, how certain planets can show up and how to kind of apply this in our own lives. And yeah, I mean, I guess last question would be how do you use the Decans in your day-to-day life? How does it kind of show up in your regular practices?
Okay, so I do the thing where once every 2 weeks or so, I'll do a fortnight tarot for myself, because a fortnight is 2 weeks for those of you who don't know.
We're not all scientists, okay? We're not all that smart. No, I'm joking.
I mean, hey, Mercury's retrograde, so I have to put that out there. So something that I do is that, if you think about the decans in terms, the decans correspond to, the 10 days or so that, the sun is moving through a sign, but they also correspond to 10 degrees of the zodiac. Even better when you have a card that actually represents the planet in that sign. Because something that I've noticed is that if I draw say, the last one I did for myself, actually, I drew the 4 of Pentacles, and I was like, Mercury is there right now as we speak. Are you kidding me? Or there was another time I drew one. I think I drew the 3 of Pentacles, and I was like, Venus is in this decan right now. Or another time when Mars was in that decan. It's just okay, this is a transit that's happening now. So if you have a good sense of the correspondences between the cards, and if you are somewhat on top of where planets are in the sky, you can actually quite literally see what the cards are trying to tell you. Hey, you might want to pay attention to this transit because it's doing something right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a cool practice.
Yeah. And then as for me, the biggest way the most frequent way I use this is I draw one tarot card every morning. I always start my mornings in that way. And I always just think about what, if there's what decan or sign or planet this card is associated with it, if it has any correspondences with my own chart. For example, I've drawn 6 of Pentacles 2 days in a row, and I don't draw this often, even though my ascendant is in this decan. And it's been really challenging me to think through. I think I kept drawing it because I don't think I was I think I was focusing so much on the scarcity side of it, the people who are receiving the gifts. And it just started to become louder that no, it's about me thinking through what gifts do I have that I'm ready to share and give. And then sure enough, Alice Sparkly Cat sent out their February 2022 horoscopes, and it was that exact same message. It was the exact same kind of questions. Yeah, for the Taurus horoscopes. I was I was pretty floored by that. My books aren't open, so I don't do client work right now, but I'm still, I still use electional and horary, for just my own personal use. And I'm constantly just trying to explore how more to use the decans. Cause currently right now, just with any of the other essential dignities, reception is always so important. The reception between the planets when you're trying to answer a horary question, or if you're trying to elect the right chart. I want to do a lot more research, and if there's anyone out there who already has or has their own theories, I would love to hear it. But there are others. it seems like there's been more exploration of what it means when a certain planet is in like a term, like a certain term. Like, for example, like let's say you ask a question about who your future husband is going to be, and that some astrologers say that the planet signifying the husband, the term that or bound that it's in, could describe that person's career. And so I have all these questions about, well, what can the Decans speak in terms of like the planets that, you know, either signify you or signify a future job, a future husband, or whoever stole your computer. I don't know.
I love that. Please keep me posted on any research that you're doing around that, and I'll kind of keep just kind of start thinking about that too, because it's really interesting. I have my Saturn and my Venus are in each other's decans, you could say, and they are trine by sign, and they're both in domicile, and so I've been looking, and I've been having this like Saturn transit to my Venus too, the trining my Venus. So I've been thinking a lot about that too, and just like them being in each other's decan, but I haven't thought about it in that way, in terms of like significators. So yeah, cool. I'm glad that you're kind of thinking about that. I wanted to see more work around the decans, specifically in regards to dignity and the more technical pieces of what we do. Are you going to say something, Mo?
I also use them in solar returns, in the sense that like if a person has like, so the idea is that when you have a solar return, the idea is that that chart operates as a vessel for, the natal promise to be carried out, highlighting different parts of the natal promise. And one of the things you pay attention to is when any planet is returning to the sign that it was in when you were born. And some people do get planetary returns, but there might be differences in decan. And so if we take decans as, here are the skill sets or like the unique contexts in which, a planet is trying to act, for example, you could see differences in like how you're supposed to work with the natal themes, because technically it's in the same sign, but it's like, I guess, mastering a different part of what that archetype means. And then finally, like, I don't know how much research has been done on this, but like, I don't think it's like, like domicile or exaltation, where you can have like planets that, are like debilitated in a decan per se. But like, I would imagine that, because certain planets are like contrary in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, I would imagine that some planets do worse in certain decans if the planets are like, the opposite of what they're trying to accomplish. So I think of like the Sun and Saturn's decans, or Saturn and the Sun's decans, for example. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a debilitation, but I think more needs to be done to unpack like what that's like.
Yeah, that's a great point. Wow. Oh, cool. I'm sure like a lot of people's brains are pinging right now from all of that. So thank you both so much for sharing so much of your wisdom. And, obviously folks are going to be interested in hearing more about the specific decans that their planets are in. So obviously check out Fixed Astrology podcast. They just wrapped up all the decans. For further learning, I would say check out Austin Koppa's book when it's out, 36 Faces, Volume 2. And then also Austin did a whole workshop, like we mentioned before, that's available on Norwalk's site for purchase too. Definitely worth it. Thank you both so much. Do you want to tell the people where they can find you? And also if you have any like last words or comments about this too, feel free to share. I don't know where that is coming from. I'm gonna let you go, Mo.
I was gonna say, I'm just gonna plug 36 Secrets, because like if you're a tarot bud and you want to dive into astrology and like learn a little bit about astrological correspondences, I think that's one of the books you should have, like if you want to go that route with your tarot. Yeah.
In terms of what the next steps are for Fixed Astrology podcast, by the time this airs, we'll be in the middle of a series on the planetary joys. So it's another series, a little bit shorter, but we hope you all will enjoy it and check it out.
That's exciting. Maybe I can bring you guys back here to talk about that when you're finished. I just wanted to grab 36 Secrets, just to kind of wave it around, by T. Susan Chang. Again, we all three of us highly recommend. I couldn't help but also grab my 36 faces. Just to show it off, I got lucky. This is like chicken scratch. Austin like did his logo or whatever in the inside of it, but yeah, it's a great text. I can't wait till the next edition comes out. I can't wait to hear what folks think about this episode too. Make sure you let us know in our socials. I hope it starts some new Twitter trend where everyone's talking about the Decan of their ascendant or their midheaven or whatever. So yeah, let us know. And where can people find you?
I'm off to tour like everywhere. Will my website be out by that point? It might be dropping sometime in April. So
yeah,
I'll have a
get one of those
finally.
exalted sun elections.
I have a couple. So yeah.
Good. Awesome. How about you, Pao?
Twitter, so you can find me on Pao Astrology, but definitely follow me. And if I make any announcements about opening my practice again or anything astrology related, it's going to be on there.
Cool. Awesome. And then of course your podcast, Fixed Astrology.
Yeah.
We release
awesome.
a podcast every month. So yeah.
Cool. In true Fixed fashion, you get one a month as a treat. Awesome. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.